Well, part of what high-low culture is doing within the food and beverage movement is this search for authenticity. Is happening so much in all our foods right now. The idea of the word artisan, handmade. How do we find these products, protect them, cook with them, and bring them to the table? Like Greg and I have talked often about, just take the world of grits. So grits became just something you would get at Waffle House or little diners around the South, a lot of quick cooking, Quaker oats. But let's go back further to the 1700s and 1800s when you actually had grist mills all over the place. And they were taking this preservation corn, this hominy, and grinding it down, and that's how they made their porridge. Porridges are throughout all cultures, all cuisines. That was the porridge of the South America, the Southern American states. Now, back then, if they were growing their corn, maybe they were growing that Cherokee White Eagle corn. That was just the corn they had in their little area. It was something that they'd been growing for 5 or 6 generations since they moved into that area. They ground it when it was cold outside. That's when you did most of your grinding because you had dried up. It was after the summer. So for them, that was just normal grits. And that was country food. I mean, this is pre-Civil War, pre-Revolutionary War stuff.
So they were drinking rum, too, then.
Learning from the Native Americans. They were doing fermented corn beverages up in North Georgia. And so now, and then through industrialization, grits just became just this average everyday food, anonymous corn, anonymous milling, high temp, just make it shelf stable, it'll last. It's a powder. It started losing its flavor. Now, through the work at Glen Roberts and Anson Mills, we're back to these and other great grist mills around the South and country. We have these, now we call them artisans. Back then we called it just,
normal.
That's just normal, that's country food.
Grits.
I don't want the country food. I don't want my cornbread with sugar in it now as like a badge of honor. When back then, they were like, of course we want sugar with it. We just can't afford it. It tastes better with sugar in it. Why do you think we have this predominance of sweets in so much of common junk food culture? Because our brains actually crave sugar. Now it's a stamp of us being authentic that I can throw all these adjectives in front of the word grits, and now I'm an artisan Southern chef when I'm just cooking the foods they cooked back then in a joy of those ingredients and saying the lowest of foods that people wouldn't even serve to visitors, just for their family. But when guests came over, they wouldn't serve grits. That's when you say, you put your potatoes on the table or your little bit of rice. But now that's become the most worthy thing of our respect, where people are finding these old corns and driving for this sense of quality, that even the most basic foods and drinks of our lives should be worthy of this noble respect. And it's a nobility not based on class distinction. It's a nobility of what's important about who we are as a people and our identity. And the more we create these foods of identity, we eliminate the boundary that separates high and low. Because high and low is the French Revolution.
Yeah.
Nobody
wants that. Oh, God.
No, and I don't want
mess.
And even with Restaurant Eugene, with a fine dining restaurant, I don't want to be the first against the wall in the revolution, because I've become so effete that I cannot relate to a populist message. And that's really what's going on with the American food scene right now.
And drink scene. It's the exact same thing. It is that dive bar clashing with the cocktail bar. There needs to be a low barrier of entry. There needs to be a general vernacular that everyone can engage in, because that is how we celebrate. Truly, you can't celebrate if you're turning some piece of it off to some group of people.
And one of the foods that really drives this is the world of offal. Now, here's a French and an English European term for parts. Now, these are the parts that people have been eating for generations. I mean, since we were hunters, before we could even we wouldn't even bring those parts back to the village because they needed to be eaten right then at their freshness. It was the prize pluck of the hunt. And that's, of course, the lights, the livers, the lungs, the kidneys, the heart, all those wonderful parts, the intestines, we call them chitlins in the South. And you're like, oh, gross. Chitlins. Well, what do you think your sausage casing is? it's chitlins. Or if I say it in French, andouette, it's a delicacy served in Strasbourg and palaces. You know, it's the same food, and it's all worthy of our respect. And that goes back to the idea of context. Where you are determines how much you're going to pay for it and whether you see a value in it.
Mm-hmm.